Jambo, Jambo Karibu, Jambo Karibu, everybody. I am Dr. Ruth Akumbu, and today I want to share with you a letter that I wrote to my friend in response to some questions that she had when George Floyd died. And there was a lot of protest, and she was feeling a bit like she didn't know how to help, and she didn't know what to do. So in a conversation where I am talking about something that I discussed or some questions that I answered for my white friend, I have to admit that it's not very comfortable. I have to admit that it's a bit of a struggle. And as much as I want to address the issues in a humane way, it is hard not to think about how other people might view how the questions are answered or the topic in general. That said, let's just dive into it. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. She says, I am sensing that this is a deep spiritual issue, and I have repented many times for the corporate sin of slavery, but I don't know how that works because my state was never a slave state. And personally, as a Norwegian American, my ancestors never owned slaves. Now, if that's where you're coming from, I don't want to invalidate your feelings about it. So as far as my friend was concerned, how did I respond to my friend? And was it in a way that moves us forward? Or is it in a way that keeps us fighting over these issues and nobody sees any change? So in addressing the fact that she says this is a spiritual issue, I say to her that this is not just a spiritual issue, this is a systemic issue because of fear. The fear created around Black people, the fear created by people who want to continue to suppress Black people, or the fear created by the media just because they think it is entertaining to continue to portray Black people in a negative light, right? Even the fear perpetrated by politicians. We continue to hear war against crime, war against crime. This war against crime is usually tied to Black people and perpetrated in the media as the Black person committing crimes. The media has pushed the whole idea that a Black person or a Black man might rob you, right? So if you constantly get bombarded with the visual that a Black man in a hoodie walking down the street might rob you, then when you see a Black man walking down the street, even subconsciously, you're going to think, oh, where's my purse? Or should I cross the street? Or should I have my mace ready? Or should I be ready to call 911? Or so you start thinking all these things, your brain goes wild because you're thinking about all these things that might happen as a result of just seeing a Black person. So there is so many things in our society that we continue to do that perpetuate racial inequalities and that perpetuate how people view Black people and people of color. So it's not just a spiritual thing, as my friend looked at it, but it's also the systems that were put in place during the slave period. And even though we're seeing movement towards changing companies consciously creating policies and starting to put structures in place that should start to create the kind of change that will allow for the minimization of racial inequality. So DEIB, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is one of the structures in companies that are gaining grounds in how we think about race and how we approach race and how we solve issues related to race in companies and education settings or in other institutions. So I continue to say to my friend, we can't tackle one and leave the other out. So talking about systemic racism or race issues being a spiritual issue or ignorance or fear. So we have to tackle all of this at once. So I continue by saying that we need to understand all the levels and find ways to break away from each of these in our own small way, while calling upon our churches, our cities, our country to do their part. So prayer without action doesn't go far, because people will say, oh, we're praying for you, we're praying for this, for this racial inequality to go away, we're praying. But prayer alone doesn't go far enough. So we need to pray, but we need to take action. As a Christian, the approach needs to be prayer, action, prayer, action. So again, prayer, action, prayer, action. So you pray, let your prayer be followed by action. Let your prayer be followed by action. So once you can add action to your prayer, we will all continue to make a dent in this very big issue in our society. So repentance is also a good step for us as individuals and a nation as a whole, because we really never know, right? We think that, like she mentioned, that her state was not a slave state. But today we know that it's not about selling and buying Black people. It's more about the people that still hold the views that came from a time period where Black people were a commodity. So we know of white supremacists, we know of Ku Klux Klan, we know of Jim Crow laws in the 60s. So there is always a version of people a version of slave trade. We know about Black and people of color being discriminately imprisoned, right? So, or incarcerated. We know of these things. So it's just another version. So as much as we repent, as much as we pray and repent, our actions need to support these prayers and help us look more keenly at our society and see if there is a version of slave trade or racial inequality that is happening that we might be taking for granted. So I go ahead to share with my friend that beside the big slave issues from about 400 years ago, there are still a lot of racist groups that might be practicing even in our own backyard that we do not know about. And even though the list of ills in our country can be tied to slavery, and we can say our ancestors were never part of the slave trade, I still believe that it is an individual and a collective effort to fight racial inequalities. So as a Black woman native to the coast of Africa, what this means to me is that the weight of slavery weighs upon my shoulders as much as it might weigh on a white person's shoulder, especially a white person that is a descendant of a slave owner who can trace their ancestry and say, oh, my ancestors bought and sold slaves. Why does it weigh on my shoulders? It weighs on my shoulders because my family might have been from a tribe that captured and sold slaves. Again, I can justify that my family were victims of slavery because I know that my family moved where my tribe is located today. That's not the original place. We've been there probably 150 years, 200 years, or slightly more. So it's not where we were original. Why did we move? Why did we move? Were we just looking for greener pastures, or were we running away from slavery? Because I do not know if my family were predators or they were prey and had to run away and abandon some of their family members, or what couldn't help their family members when they were being captured. On behalf of my family, I want to again say to cousins, I would like to call them my cousins, I am sorry. I am sorry because you were treated as a commodity. I am sorry because my family might have been one of those people that caused harm. My family might have been one of those people that ran into the forest because they couldn't fight back when the ancestors were being captured. So I apologize on behalf of myself, and I apologize on behalf of my family. So before I go ahead and continue to talk about my responses to my friend who is from a Norwegian background, or even to the people who are listening to this and had family members who were slave owners, I wanted to make sure that you know that this is a shared burden. As much as Black people are calling for for changes because of slave trade or because of slavery, I personally want to acknowledge that this was also something that hurt us as Black people on the continent of Africa. And people have also argued that, well, it was a time period and there was slavery going on. People were buying and selling slaves. I am not disputing that slavery existed before people started buying and selling slaves. What I'm saying here is that there was a certain inhumane approach to the buying of selling slave or during the transatlantic slave trade. There was a very inhumane way of doing it, because my culture, even in present day, as young as I am, my culture, that is a wink because I'm not all that young, I know of a culture of a tribe that owned slaves. I saw a tribe that owned slaves. And I heard stories of my tribe when they went to war and they captured people and how they treated the people. So these two instances that I'm talking about, and I grew up seeing one happening in front of my own eyes, is the slaves were there, but the slaves had full lives. They had, yes, they would be at the beck and call of that person, but these slaves also had full lives with their wives and their families and their homes and their farms. So the only time you knew that this person was a slave was when they called them to come do a certain chore. And it is very interesting to me because one of the slaves took pride in serving and did not want it any other way. He took pride in serving and did not want it any other way. So, not justifying that slavery is a good thing, but basically saying that the way slavery was conducted during the transatlantic slave trade was not generally how slaves were treated. No, it was not. This is based on my experience growing up with a tribe that owned slaves. My tribe, I didn't know of any. I heard of the stories of people that got integrated in the society once they were captured at war and they became part of that tribe. They never brought them into the family, into the tribe and said, all you have to do is serve and work and just be at our beck and call at every time and not have a life, and they have kids and let those kids become a product. No, these people became members of families, not just by, okay, now you're called John Smith instead of what? Oluwa or something. Sorry, or to any Oluwa out there. So these families were adopted into the family of the person that captured you, or if the palace said this person is going to be a part of your family, they became a part of your family. They would even marry into the family, or they'll be given away as a bride. The family will give them away as a bride, and we will start a whole family of their own and integrate into the society, not being labeled as a slave. Yes, everybody knew they came into the society as a slave, but 3-4 generations after that, nobody's talking about it, talking about your ancestors or that person's ancestors as slaves, because there wasn't any systemic structure in place that kept them as slaves even after they were integrated into the family. So in the United States, we see people bearing names, and the names are not their original African names. If you want it to be a bit more humane, all the slaves that came from Africa onto the Americas or Europe, they should have still been carrying their family names, or only change their name when they married into a new family. It almost feels like they were trying to say, okay, now you're a member of our family, you're bearing the name Smith, now you're a Smith. But no, you're not a Smith. You're a Smith as in you're the property of Smith, which kills your family name, because if you married your children, or did not bear your name, they bear the name Smith, basically wiping out your family name, and you couldn't trace who you are based on your family name. Also points to the direction that if you were given a slave name and you continue to bear a slave name, that is your complex identity. That is your story. That is your history. And it's all about embracing that history and making the most of it and saying, how does this event make me who I am, and how can I use that to be a better human? Or how does my past influence my future? How does the name you're bearing influence how you look at life? How does it influence how society treats you? How is it beneficial? But this has been really deep, and I have wandered a bit from the letter and touched on different things on the letter. And that was just one question, okay? That was not even the rest of the questions. So now I'm going to dive into question number 2. These questions did not come in the order in which I am presenting them. I've shifted the order and added some more information that I didn't share with her. And I am talking to some of the points. So it's not a direct me reading you everything that I wrote and the questions they asked. It's me trying to explore these questions a bit more broadly and leave you with many things to think about at the end of the day. So my friend writes to me, I've lived in communities where we were a minority, and our kids have attended public schools in which they are among 5 or 6 Caucasian students in their classrooms. Some classmates look down on them because they are white and show it in their comments and actions. But when that becomes an issue, we try to remind our kids to pray about it and be part of the solution, not the problem. Then we remind them of all the amazing, respectable Black people we know. How our favorite friends at our church, our new church, are Black. When you read this for the first time, it is easy to say, oh, now you know how it feels. But I want to caution us from such reactions. Empathy is a virtue. Empathy is a virtue. I noted to my friend that I'm very saddened by what her children have been facing. And I'm grateful that she's teaching them love through the experience. As you draw closer to God through prayer, I want to encourage you to educate them on the history of Black people, not just what they are taught in school. And we know that some schools do not teach it, do not teach Black history the way that Black history should be taught. So I encourage my friend to go above and beyond to teach her children about inequalities in society, the history of inequalities, the background of Black people, and why not? Teach them about slavery. Teach them about slavery. Not because you're trying to cause them to feel guilty, but because it is by knowing our past that we can improve the present. And it is by knowing how to improve the present and improving the present that we can improve the future or create a better future for ourselves and for our children. So if you don't teach children facts about their past or our past, then we should expect the same mistakes to repeat themselves in the future. Okay. So I continue to encourage my friend and motivate her to go beyond in educating her kids, using these challenges that they are facing as a stepping stone to educate their kids about inequality and treating other people as less than. So this gave me an opportunity to share with my friend how I feel when I hear people dismiss racial inequality or dismiss structures like diversity, equity, inclusion that is trying to balance out racial inequalities in society. People dismiss the Black struggle. We hear things like, it's the 20th century, shouldn't be an issue anymore. It shouldn't, but it is, right? It shouldn't, but it is. So don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. Look and see what is the issue. It might not be slave trade, but the consequences of slave trade and slave policy. So now let's look at it and see what is it now that we can fix? What is it that our generation can do differently to improve upon the narratives around Black people, upon the perceptions that surround Black people, or the negative perceptions that surround Black people? So don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it just because you think that we shouldn't be having this type of struggles in the 21st century. Because we are having struggles in the 21st century. You think I'm lying? Fine. Go back and watch George Floyd begging for air. Begging for air. Go back and watch that video and tell me that something in our society isn't broken. We need to keep working. We need to keep working on improving inequalities in our society. I want my friends' children to be treated as equals. I want our children, Black people's children, to be treated as equals in every environment they find themselves in, no matter what differences that they have. So let's work on improving inequalities in our society. Let's work on improving inequalities in our society. Whether we are Black, white, Native American, no matter who we are, let's work. We are part of a community. I'm hoping that in some small way, by sharing some of my experiences, by sharing conversations like the one I had with my friend, that you might be encouraged. Somebody might be encouraged that one thing I say might move us into a better future, might reduce inequality. I am hoping that by just being here now, that I have made a difference in one person's life. And especially in one Black person's life, or in one Black woman's life, or in one Black child's life. That is my greatest hope. If we want a better world, we need to work to create a better world. I might not have everything I need to give you a better world, but in some small way, I hope my voice, my experiences can provide you that. So before we go to the next one, I wanted to just make this comment. More white people need to have Black friends. More white people need to have Black friends. And more Black people need to have white friends. I have been blessed to have amazing white friends. So my friends, I can have pretty much any conversation with. My friend wrote me this letter because she believed that she can have this conversation with me and I would not leave them feeling like dirt. Because that gets us nowhere. Leaving people feeling like dirt gets us nowhere as a human race. So like I was saying, I have been blessed to have such good people in my life that are supportive, that I can have deep conversations with. I might be their token Black friend sometimes, but trust me, it is that kind of a token Black friend that I want to be. There are some people that I would never be their token Black friend. I will be their acquaintance, but I will never be their token Black friend because they use the fact that they have me as a friend negatively or as a show off. Oh, look at me, I have a Black friend. No, that's not the kind of friendship I'm talking about. I'm not talking about people going out there and saying, yeah, look at me, I also have Black friends. No. No be the thing that what they talk. No. I am talking about the kind of friend that once you sit down to have a conversation, you're not walking on eggshell. It might be uncomfortable. I'm not saying all the conversations are going to be comfortable. It might be uncomfortable, but you are both coming from a place of love and respect. And you know that this is a tough conversation that needs to be had, and you have it. So I want to just say how proud I am of my friend for writing me this letter and giving me the opportunity to share with her how I am looking at this issue she's raising. And I want to thank all my other friends that when they see me crying about something that has to do with race, they don't dismiss it. They don't go pray for it and sit in their corners. They make a phone call. They sit with me and we talk and we explore how to improve our society. Like I mentioned earlier, prayer, action, prayer, action. We shouldn't be getting more action from people that don't pray than from people who pray. We should be getting more action from people who pray. Works, prayer without works is dead. Prayer without works is dead. Look it up. The Bible says it. So, again, more people need Black friends, more white people need Black friends, or more Black people need white friends. Let's get friends that have different backgrounds than us. Let's allow our children to socialize with people from different backgrounds. It helps build our understanding of each other. It helps us know that we are more alike than we are different. It helps us find the things in which we share commonalities instead of our differences. It helps us change this negative narrative. It helps us change our deficit mentality about other people. And it puts us into a positive framework. It puts us into a positive space where we can start building. Not as minority versus the majority or Black versus white, but more as in celebrating the fact that you're Black. What is beautiful about you being Black? You're white. What is beautiful about you being white? How do we work together when it comes to our differences in culture, our differences in thinking, our differences in just the way we live our lives? Parents that have children in a position like my white friend is in a church and has a Black friend. Develop that relationship, nurture that relationship, grow that relationship, move that relationship beyond the church. Christianity shouldn't be a pulpit experience. It should be a place we meet and move our values into our day-to-day lives. So build those relationships with people that are different. Allow your kids to have an experience that you as a white person didn't have growing up. If you didn't socialize, if you didn't spend a lot of time with Black people, so create that opportunity for your child to be able to spend a lot of time with Black kids. I don't know. I could just hear some Black people go, yeah, don't ask me to do that. Well, I'm asking you to do it. I'm asking you to create opportunities for your child to spend time with white kids. Get to know them. Let them get to know you. It's work. I know it's work, but put in the work for a better future. Put in the work for a better future. Put in the work so that when your child is in a position to work in a team with other kids from different countries, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, they will be able to do it because they are comfortable in that environment. They have learned to integrate themselves in that environment that is different, diverse. You're not doing it for you. You're doing it for your children and for the future that your children will have. As much as we don't like to do a lot of things these days, we should remember that we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're doing it also for the future. We're creating a world that our children can live in. I don't have children, but I have nephews, I have nieces, and I have my friends' children, which I want them to have a better world to live in, a more diverse world that is accepting of who they are. I don't want a world where my niece or my nephew grows up in and cannot feel safe in an environment where they are a minority, or have to feel uncomfortable because they find themselves to be the token Black person in the room. This needs to change. We need to change, and we need to create these opportunities so that our children can have a better life, better experiences, reduced inequalities, because they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. What are we doing today to create better leaders tomorrow? If we keep allowing the gap between us to be wide, then What we're fighting against today will continue to be the problems that they face in the future. So let's allow our kids to build deeper relationship with people that are different than them. And yes, let's share with them our values so that when we know that when they go out into the society and start integrating and building deep relationship with people, they can still preserve their core values, unless their core value is racist. Then no. But if their core value is good, then they are going to be okay. Then they're going to be okay. And our society in the future will be okay. So one of the greatest things that my friend did for me as an immigrant was that she made sure that the jobs I was doing for her, I was well paid. She never took advantage of me. She made sure I was well paid for the jobs that I did. I didn't have a lot of experience in the jobs that I was doing for her. I was learning on the job, but she made sure that I was well paid. I was able to do the things I needed to do. I was able to survive. I was able to survive because she didn't look at me as in, oh, she's a poor African girl. She's going to be grateful for whatever I give her. No, 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 that's not what she did. She paid me a really good wage, which allowed me to survive in the early stages of my stay in the United States. That was my white friend. That was my white friend empowering me. That was my white friend giving me an opportunity, even though I didn't have a lot of experience. That was my white friend basically standing in the gap for me as a Christian woman. That was my white friend making sure that I wasn't getting crumbs just because I was going to be grateful for those crumbs. So yes, I'm not just sharing this letter because it's some letter to add another episode on my podcast. I'm sharing this letter because this is a letter from a woman that I highly respect. This is a letter from a woman that has constantly supported me in almost every adventure that I have taken. My nonprofit work, she supported that. I will get $200 checks in the mail. I will get money to go on a trip and do work on the continent of Africa. So this friend is the kind of friend that bridges gaps. And this is the reason why this letter is very important to me. And sharing this relationship with my friend, with you, I'm hoping that some way, somehow, something in it motivates you, encourages you, challenges you. So prayer is not enough. Well wishes is not enough. Going above and beyond is what is needed to create a better future. And again, I want to thank my friend for trusting me with her struggles, for trusting me to give her feedback on a topic that was really challenging, or that is really challenging. I've had multiple conversations with a lot of people, but this one always stands out. This one always stands out. Thank you, my friend. Asante Asana. Next, my friend writes, I think one of the most discouraging things for me is the feeling that 44 years of accumulated day-to-day respectful and melting pot peaceful living seems to hold no weight, along with accumulative decades of same from millions of Americans of various skin pigments. So my understanding of this issue that she's addressing here is that there's a lot of Americans, including herself, that have been respectful, peace-loving, doing their part to help society, or doing their part to make sure that inequalities were reduced in our society. She just feels like it didn't hold any weight. It doesn't hold any weight in the face of criticism from people of color when we start talking about white, Black racism, or when we start talking about racism. It weighs upon her as a white woman, and it makes her feel like nothing that they've been doing means anything. So another way I interpret this is all the work that all the other non-Black people, non-people of color have done over the years has no weight to the cause. Why do we feel like all the things we've done, our best efforts so far, are not making any difference or are not appreciated? I agree that millions of white Americans day to day are good people, and they're doing their best every day to be good people, which is why systemic racism is such a tricky thing. It is such a tricky thing because so it is built on a foundation that was created about 400 years ago. It's not easy for us to break habits that we maybe develop within 6 to 7 months. It's not going to be easy to break habits that have been bad for over 400 years. So I get it when my friend feels like the day-to-day, the respect, the efforts that she's making, it doesn't seem to mean anything when it comes to all of this, to racism or racial inequality, or when people start pushing back and talking about calling for justice. It just seems like we don't care about the other people that are making efforts. We do care. That's why I just spent a little bit of time to tell you about how my friend bridged the gap between her and me. She was making sure I had economic empowerment. She was making sure that the things that I do, she's supporting my efforts to create a better world, to create income for myself. She's always there championing me up. Like, I can guarantee that the only thing I do for my friend is being her friend. I don't like maybe hanging out with her, having conversation with her. I haven't even seen my friend in so many years. But it does not stop her from supporting all my ventures. She's not doing it because, I don't think she's doing it because I'm a Black woman. She's basically doing it because she's a good person. She's just a very good person and wants me to succeed. She doesn't want to take advantage of my weaknesses. She wants me to succeed. She wants to empower me economically. She wants to give me opportunity. She wants to support my dreams. She pays me more than I deserved for the job because she cared about what I'm going to need to survive. So no, all the work she's done in the last 44 years of her life, of 45, 46, 47 years of her life now, it's not in vain. It is not in vain because she impacted me. She impacted me. And if we each impact just one person, I guarantee that we will make a difference. If we just each try to invest in just one person, I guarantee that we will make a difference. She made a difference in my life, and now making a difference in other. I'm hoping I'm making a difference in other people's lives. You don't have to help all Black people or all people of color. Can you help one? Can you create opportunities for one? Can you make a difference in the life of one? Just one. That's the challenge. Just one. Think about it and try it. That said, when I heard her question, or when I heard her thought on 44 years of accumulated day-to-day respectful, peaceful living, and taking into consideration all these the positive attitudes that she's had, it made me think about the 400 years of struggle that Black people have been through. And it made me reflect and acknowledging her pain and grateful that she was willing to open up about this pain. But I stated to her, you can begin to understand the frustration of over 400 of maltreatment of Black people. These Black people are sometimes not only discouraged, they are furious. They are furious. Like, we're people too. We're people too. We might have used us as commodities years and years ago, but we're people too, and we should know better, shouldn't we? We should know better. So, yeah. So if she's feeling the weight for 44 years of her life at the time of this letter, it just made me imagine how are Black people feeling that have had to carry the weight of discrimination for 400 years in the United States. Yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's not that one person have carried this weight for 400 years. It's been transferred from generation to generation, and each generation is carrying this weight that was a result of a system that was just not humane, that started 400 years ago. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, think about it. You might be thinking as a white person today that all the things you're doing, people don't see it, it's not enough. Why is it not enough? It's not that it's not enough. It's just that it's not easy to change habits that have been built for 400 years, or to change systems that have been built for 400 years. That sometimes we don't even know that this system exists in some of our companies. So it's not that what you're doing is not good enough. It's just that it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time. And purposeful effort, purposeful effort. It's just going to take time to change some of the structural inequalities that are in our society. And it's going to take a collective effort from both Black people and white people and all peoples. I think that is why I'm so interested in DEIB now, because in the past, I just looked at DEIB as something that people used to quench political thirst or to stop people from critiquing their companies. But when handled properly, when you run into a company that handles diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging really well, you can feel the difference. You can feel the difference. I applied for work with a company and I went through their website, I went through and I read through their materials, and I looked at their structures, I looked at the people in their structures, and I was so impressed. I was so impressed by their deliberate and purposeful implementation of DEIB. Not just, oh, we have a DEIB office. No. Implementation of DEIB. Very well done. Very, very well done. That made me want to work with the company. I did not get into the second round of the interviews, but I understand, because the skill sets they were looking for was slightly different than the skill sets I was bringing to the table, or I didn't have enough experience, which is another big issue, right? When you deal with a lot of people of color, they're not going to have the experiences in the companies that you're looking for. So once you start thinking, I need to hire somebody from this, somebody's for this position, it is equally important to remember that there's a lot of very hardworking people, whether they're people of color or not, there's a lot of very hardworking people that just need a foot in the door, that just need the opportunity to actually sit down on the job and do and learn the job well enough to do it even excel in it. So as much as people are constantly are looking for 30 years experience, I'm exaggerating, of course, 20 years experience, I'm exaggerating again, of course, but 10 years experience, 5 years experience, sometimes most people don't have those experiences. And it's up to the company to give these people a chance, especially people of color, especially people of color. Sometimes it's up to the company to give people a chance. My friend gave me a chance to work on a job. It was a low-end job. It wasn't like it was a high-end job, but there's still professionals in that low-end job that she could have brought in and paid them even slightly less, and they would have done the job way better than I did. I learned on the job, but she never refused to give me the opportunity because I didn't have the experience. She gave me the opportunity, and she helped me to learn the essentials and learn the things. When I didn't do something well, she'll come back and she'll show me, this is how it's done. And if it was something that was basically something that was actually really hard, she would just say, nope, this cannot be done. I think this is time for us to get rid of this thing and replace it with something else. So she accommodated me, and she created a space for me to learn, but she also knew that there were some things that could not be fixed and it needed to just be replaced. So let's give people a chance. And that's why we have HR and training people, giving them a time period where they learn and they show that they can learn and grow in that position. I know there's some jobs that you have to hit the floor running. I'm not gonna say that hire me as an RN, meanwhile I I don't have any CNA, I only have CNA experience. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm basically saying that in positions where you can help the person learn on the job, give them the job. And please don't pay them a low rate. They still have to live and survive. Come on, pay them a fair wage so that as they're even learning on the job and growing on the job, they can still pay their bills. Don't shortchange them because they never had the opportunity to have the 5-year experience you're looking for. Let's be just. Let's be just. Let's be just. And let's be kind in our hiring practices. Let's be kind. And let's remember that people can grow on the job. Let's be willing to train, especially people of color who are willing to work hard. Let's be willing to give them fair opportunities and help them grow in those opportunities. So this last one is a bit tricky. She writes, "We are still the melting pot, and those full of anger and hate are very loud right now." I did not take that as a negative, you know, like when you read it years after, you almost want to put a different spin to the heart of the statement. Right now, this sentence feels a little bit flawed because it makes me feel like I need to defend the people that were out on the streets. Yes, right after the death of George Floyd, Black people were very angry. A lot of people were very angry. I don't think it was hate, but I can understand how a white person looking at it from their perspective can feel like it was hatred towards white people. But I don't necessarily think it was hatred towards white people. That was the stick that broke the camel's back. It's not easy to pull off layers and layers of things that people have had to suppress for many years, their families suppressed. And it's really hard. Like, I think I empathize with this position, but I think it's really, really hard to feel the pain where it actually hurts. This other proverb that says that you don't know where it hurts until you're in the person's shoes. So it's basically to say that there's layers and layers of things that people got angry about when that happened, when George Floyd died and there was a lot of riots, or when they killed a Black man, when they killed a Black boy, and you see that it's so unjust. When you see the killing of a Black person and you see that it was so unjust, and then the justice system doesn't do anything about it. And then you have to still smile and go to work every day. There's so many things that are happening that Black people are just living with it every day. And that one moment when it comes out the way it comes out, and it is labeled as hate, it's hard. It's a bit hard. Like, it's a bit hard to explain that away, or it's a bit hard to swallow. It's just like I was saying, that you just can pray and not do anything. So it's like you try to explain things away. When I'm in pain, you say pray. To me, you're trying to tell me to pray away my pain, when it is something that needs to actually change. This is not like saying, oh, my happiness depends on me. Yes, it does depend on me. But there's some things that is just it's so blatant that we just have to scream about it. We just have to like talk about it. We just have to like expose our pain, right? So once we expose our pain or try to make our voice heard, we don't want to be labeled as hateful. We don't want to be labeled as loud and angry and bitter. You know, it's like every time that we finally come up from the choking and catch a breath of air and want to say, this hurts. It's almost like, don't say it hurts, because now you sound angry and bitter and loud, and we can't stand the angry Black woman, or we can't stand this angry Black man or violent Black man. So it's that's not where my friend was coming from, but I can hear other people, I can hear my audience, or I can hear other Black people saying, oh, you're labeling that as hate. Wait, now you're using this to shut me up, right? So I wanted to address this from both perspectives and say, as much as she's seeing it as hate, and a lot of Black people, white people were seeing things like as hate and irresponsible and reckless, it's also just not completely true. People were definitely angry, but I don't necessarily think that people were hateful. When somebody kills somebody in your family and you scream in anger, it's not because you hate that person. Even when the child says to the father, I hate you, or says to the mother, I hate you, we all understand where it's coming from. It actually, if you reverse this whole hate thing, I almost feel like Black people feel like they hate it. I feel like some days we feel like we hate it, because if there is, we know there's structural inequalities, and if somebody is not doing something within their power and they're in a position of power to change structural inequality, then you hate me as a Black person. You don't want to see me progress, because if you cared enough and wanted to see me progress, you will do what is necessary to make sure that I wasn't in a position where I am being treated unjustly. And I would do the same for you, right? So I actually feel sometimes like, wait, why do white people hate us so much? What did we ever do to them? Why is it that you don't want us to progress? Like, come on, like, if you're angry that I am screaming about a man dying on the street, I don't get it. Why do you hate me so much that you don't even want me to scream when I see somebody that looks like me being killed? Why don't you want me to express some emotion? Okay, I just had to let that out. During one of the rallies, I attended one of the rallies, and I heard people say, "It's been 400 years. Go back to Africa." It's another way of saying, using God's book or the Bible to slap Black people in the face, because you're dismissive of my pain and telling me to go back to Africa. So instead of facing up to the reasons I'm crying, you're telling me to suck it up and go back to where I came from. If I don't like it, I should go back to where I came from. How do you respond to that? How would you respond to that? So if you're going, that's how your response is going to be, then the hate is not coming from me. The hate is coming from you, right? The hate is coming from you, because if you actually loved me, that would not be your response to my tears or to my pain or to my cry for justice. So if somebody is calling for justice, you don't tell them that, oh, you have it so great. If you don't like it, go away, right? You listen to their pain. You listen to where they're coming from. You empathize. And you see if there is a changes that can be made. You don't label them, right? You don't label them. It goes both ways. So when we filter people's conversation, let's be fair, let's be empathetic, let's try to consider the context in which the situation is happening and go from there. So I was in an interview and they asked me, are you willing to talk about racial issues? It took me aback, because it was like, yes, why would I not want to have conversations about racial issues? And then I realized that, no, not everybody wants to talk about racial issues. I remember my early years in the United States, you do not talk about religion, you do not talk about politics, and you do not talk about race. Those were the three rules that I was given straight up. You do not. So for many years, that's all I knew. It was a pleasant surprise when I said it. People started engaging in conversations. When I was asked that in an interview, it took me by surprise. But I remember, people don't want to be labeled. Nobody wants to be labeled. This particular episode, I was so stressed up. I have been thinking about this episode for, I think, almost a week and a half or 2 weeks. And I was so stressed. Every time I sat down to prepare for this episode, I got just weak-boned. Every time I sat down, I felt discouraged. I felt weak. I felt like I was going to get labeled. I felt like I was going to say the wrong thing. I just had so many voices and emotions running that I just did not want to do it, even though something in my heart is begging me to do this, to share this letter and discuss portions of this letter with everybody. I just was like, it was a struggle. And I have to tell you that I sat down and I just took bite sizes. And I said, I'm going to sit down and just start and just go head on. Whatever comes out of this, comes out of it. And we will work with what we have. But I have to tell you, this is one of the most frightening episodes for me so far. This is one of the most frightening episodes that I have recorded. Yes, I'm a little bit, I am just, I don't know. It was a hard one. So thank you. Thank you for not labeling me. Thank you for not shutting me out. Thank you for allowing me space in your life to share this letter with you and my thoughts and just the feelings and emotions that went into some of it. Thank you for allowing my voice to be heard in your home. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for sharing my episodes, and thank you for supporting me. Every effort helps to create a better, equitable world. And I thank you for your part in making our world a better place. Asante sana.